You want to know the moment a person realizes they have been lying to themselves for a very long time? It is not a big moment. It does not arrive with music or a speech. It arrives as 3 quiet knocks on a bedroom door at midnight, and the sound of your own heart doing something your brain has not approved. That is where the story starts, but not where it begins. My name is Owen Hartley. I am 38 years old. I restore old houses for a living, the kind that have been ignored for decades, that have warped floors and leaky pipes and windows that stick in humid weather. People hire me to fix what they cannot fix themselves. I am good at it. I have been good at it for 15 years. What I am less good at, as it turns out, is recognizing when something broken is standing right in front of me and it is not a house. 3 years ago, my marriage ended. Not dramatically. That is the part people always seem surprised by. They expect something explosive, something with a clear villain and a clear moment. There was none of that. My ex-wife, Karen, was not a bad person. I was not a bad person either, as far as I could tell. We were just 2 people who had slowly grown into different shapes, and one day we both noticed that the shapes no longer fit together, and neither of us had enough left to pretend otherwise. She took a job on the coast. I bought a rundown farmhouse on the outskirts of town that my contractor's brain said was a good investment and that the rest of me recognized as a place to hide. The farmhouse was a disaster. 2 floors, warped floorboards throughout the ground level, a kitchen with cabinets that had not been updated since probably the early 90s, and a back porch that tilted a few degrees to the left no matter what I did. I spent the first year just making it livable. The second year I started making it good. I worked on it every evening after my actual jobs, and on weekends I barely left the property. My brother called once a month to check that I was not disappearing into myself. I told him I was fine. He did not entirely believe me, but he let it go. I ate most of my dinners standing at the kitchen counter. Not because I did not have a table. I had bought one, a solid oak thing I found at an estate sale. But sitting at a table alone felt too deliberate, like a choice I was making rather than just a fact I was living with, and I was not ready to make that choice consciously. That was the life I had. Quiet. Ordered. Mine. Then Frances Alderton called me on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. Frances lived half a mile down the road. She was 63, had white hair she kept short and practical, and had been widowed 8 years earlier. She brought me soup the first winter I moved in, and when I tried to pay her for it, she looked at me like I had said something ridiculous. We had been something close to friends ever since. She did not meddle, which I appreciated. But she also did not stay quiet when she thought something mattered. She said she knew a woman who needed a safe place to stay. Short term, she said. A few months, maybe longer. She had an 8-year-old daughter, and she needed somewhere clean and quiet and away from a situation that had been going on too long. Frances said the woman's name was Serena Wade. I said I had never rented out rooms. Frances said that was fine, since she was not asking me to rent. She was asking me to do something decent. That was a harder argument to make a case against. Serena arrived the following Wednesday evening. 1 suitcase. 1 laundry basket that she was balancing at an awkward angle under her left arm. And her daughter Rosie, 8 years old, holding a stuffed bear by one ear, who walked through my front door and stood very still in the entryway, looking at the farmhouse like she was deciding something important about it. Serena spoke before she had even looked properly at the room. She said she could pay the first month upfront right now if I wanted. Her voice was level. Her eyes were not. They were doing the thing eyes do when a person has spent a long time learning not to expect much and is waiting to be proven right. I said she could bring the bags in first. That the money could wait. She blinked. Just once. Like she had prepared for a number of responses, and that one was not among them. Rosie, meanwhile, had found her way to the workshop door off the hallway and was peering at it with great interest. She asked what was in there. I said it was where I kept my tools. She asked if she could see. I said maybe tomorrow if her mum said it was all right. She nodded seriously and went back to her mother. We had tea that first evening at the kitchen table. I showed them both the upstairs room and the bathroom that Serena and Rosie would share. I explained how the hot water took a minute to come through on cold mornings. Rosie asked about the back porch and why it was tilted. I said I was working on it. She said she could help. I said I would keep that in mind. Before Serena went to bed that night, she stopped in the hallway and said thank you. Quietly, like the words cost her something. I said it was no trouble. We both knew it was not nothing. The following week, we sat at the kitchen table and wrote out an agreement. It was Serena's idea, and it was a good one. Separate rooms. Groceries split unless otherwise agreed. No decisions about Rosie from me unless Serena asked directly. No pulling Rosie into anything that was an adult problem. No mixed signals. No making things complicated. The no romance rule was Serena's too. She said it plainly, without any apology, looking at the piece of paper rather than at me. I said that was completely reasonable. I nodded while I said it. I nodded a little too quickly. I noticed that even at the time. Because here is the thing I did not tell anyone. Not my brother, not Francis, not myself in any honest way for quite a long time. From the very first evening, something had already taken note. The way Serena straightened Rosie's collar before they went out to bring in the rest of the bags. The way she said thank you like she was not sure she had earned it. The fact that she looked completely worn through but had not once, in the whole evening, looked sorry for herself. I closed a door inside myself that night and called it being responsible. For 16 months I kept that door closed. Until a Wednesday night in late autumn, when the house was dark and quiet and I was lying on my back staring at the ceiling, not sleeping, not fully admitting why, and someone knocked 3 times on my bedroom door. Soft knocks. Not urgent. Just enough. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something honestly. If someone you had been quietly trying not to love for over a year knocked on your door in the middle of the night and asked you the one question you had been carefully avoiding, would you answer it? Or would you find a reason to protect the version of your life that felt safe? I had been choosing safe for 3 years. I got up and opened the door. She was standing in the hallway in an oversized gray hoodie and dark sweatpants. Her dark hair pulled back but not neatly, like she had done it quickly without looking. Her arms were folded across her chest. Not the kind of folded that means defensive. The kind that means you are trying to hold yourself steady. She looked nervous. Not frightened. Not upset. Nervous in a specific, deliberate way that was somehow worse than either of those things. My first thought, the way it always is when something unexpected happens after midnight, was Rosie. I said her name before I said anything else. Is Rosie okay? Serena said yes. Rosie was asleep. I exhaled. Then what's wrong? I said. She did not answer immediately. She was doing that thing where a person is trying to decide, at the very last second, whether to go through with something. I could see it in the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. And it occurred to me that she had probably been standing at my door for a while before she knocked. I asked if she wanted to come in. She said yes. I stepped back. She came in. I closed the door and it made a small, soft click that felt louder than it should have. I stayed standing near the door. She sat on the edge of the chair beside my desk, the one I usually threw jackets on, and looked at the floor. For a bit, neither of us said anything. I was very aware of the time. The clock on my nightstand said 12:34, and of the fact that the house was completely quiet around us, which somehow made the room feel smaller. I said, "This is usually where someone tells me a pipe has burst." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. Then it faded. She looked up at me and there were tears in her eyes, not falling, just sitting there. And she told me that Rosie had said something to her earlier that night. I waited. She said that after she had put Rosie to bed, Rosie had asked why I slept in a separate room. And Serena paused here like she was still processing the second part herself. Rosie had asked why the two of us were still pretending. I did not say anything. I was not sure I could have, because I knew exactly what that meant. I had known for a long time, actually, in the way you know things you are not ready to do anything about. Serena and I had built something in this farmhouse over 16 months that did not have a clean name. It was not just two people sharing a space. It was grocery lists with notes on them. It was Serena leaving the kitchen light on when she went to bed early because she knew I came in late from jobs. It was me fixing things in Rosie's room before Serena had to ask, because I had noticed them and it was just obvious. It was two people who had arranged themselves around each other's lives so completely that the arrangement had become the life. And we had called it a practical situation. Serena stood up from the chair. I stood straighter. There were maybe 4 feet between us, which suddenly felt like a measurement that mattered. She said, and I could hear how much this had cost her to come here and say that she had not come because she had forgotten the agreement we made. She remembered all of it. She had thought about all of it. She was here because she had thought about it and still ended up in this hallway. Owen, she said. Just my name. But the way she said it, she took 1 step forward. Why are we still sleeping in separate rooms? I did not answer right away. I want to be clear about that. Not because I was playing some kind of careful game, but because the honest answer required me to admit something I had not admitted yet, and I needed a second to understand that I was actually going to do it. The easy answers were right there. We have an agreement. It is better this way. It is better for Rosie. Let us not complicate things. All of those would have been partially true, and all of them would have been a way of protecting myself at the cost of her standing here, having been brave enough to say what I had not. The real answer was that I was afraid. Plain and simple and not very noble. Afraid that wanting this meant needing it, and needing it meant that when it eventually went wrong, because I had evidence that things went wrong, I would not just lose a housemate. I would lose everything that had made the last 16 months feel like a life rather than a waiting room. I opened my mouth to say something. I still do not know exactly what was going to come out. And then the floorboard outside the room creaked. Both of us turned. Rosie stood in the doorway holding her bear by 1 arm, 1 sock on and 1 not, squinting against the light. She said she had the dream again. Serena moved immediately, the way a parent moves when a child says something like that. Everything else in the room, all of it, stepped back without discussion. She crossed to Rosie and bent down and asked her what she needed. Rosie looked past her at me and said, "Can Owen check the window?" I was already moving. Rosie's room was the smallest in the farmhouse. She had asked the week after they moved in if she could pick the color. I said yes. She spent 3 days considering it with a seriousness I found genuinely impressive before deciding on pale green. She said white walls felt like being inside a refrigerator. We painted it together on a Saturday while she told me at length about every animal she believed should be allowed to be kept as a house pet but was not. That had been 14 months ago. I checked the window latch. It was fine. Then the wardrobe, because Rosie had a theory that whatever frightened her in her dreams had to exist somewhere and would probably choose somewhere obvious. Then under the bed. All clear, I told her. She nodded, satisfied. Serena tucked her back in. I was turning to leave when Rosie said my name. I stopped. She was lying on her side looking up at me with those mostly asleep eyes. She asked me something then. Just threw it out there the way kids do, with no warning and no apparent awareness of what it would do to the air in the room. She said that since I lived here and they lived here and I was the one who fixed everything, did that sort of make me their family? Nobody said anything. Serena's hand was still on the blanket edge. I looked at Rosie's face, which was completely calm because she had asked the question the way you ask something you think already has an obvious answer, and I felt something shift in my chest that I did not have a name for. I said carefully that families take care of each other. Yes. She thought about that for a second. Then she said, so yes then. And before either Serena or I could figure out what to do with that, Rosie tucked her bear under her chin, closed her eyes, and was asleep within 30 seconds. Children are remarkable that way. I stepped out into the hallway. Serena pulled the door to, leaving it open just a crack the way she always did, and then stood there with her back against the wall and looked at the ceiling. After a moment she said she was sorry. I said, for what? She said, for Rosie. For putting that on me. She said Rosie attached to people and she should have been more careful about that. I said Rosie had not done anything wrong. Serena shook her head like that was not the point. The point, she said, and she said it quietly like she was telling herself something she had already known for a while, was that if this did not work out, if I eventually decided this was all too complicated and I wanted my house back, it would not just be her who got hurt. I said her name. She looked at me. I told her I understood what she was afraid of. And then I told her something that was true and that I had not let myself say clearly before. I said that the reason I was standing in this hallway, at this hour, still in this house after 16 months of being careful, was not because I was doing her a favor. I had stopped thinking of it that way a long time ago. This was not a situation I was managing. It was a life I was living. and I was more afraid of losing it than of the mess that might come with keeping it. She went very still. Then her phone rang downstairs. Not a gentle buzz. A full ring, sharp in the quiet of the house. She did not move toward the stairs right away. She just looked at the floor, and I watched her face change in a way I recognized. Not panic, but a kind of bracing. The way a person looks when they know exactly who is calling and what it is going to cost them to pick up. Daniel Holt. I knew the name. I knew enough of the story. He was Rosie's father, Serena's ex. They had been separated for 2 years. He was not a violent man as far as I knew, but he was the kind of man who used everything available to him when he wanted to apply pressure, and he had a great deal available. A good job, a lawyer on retainer, and a practiced talent for making reasonable things sound suspicious. The phone rang a second time. Serena said if she did not answer, he would call again. Then send messages. Then show up at Rosie's school tomorrow morning being visible about his concern. She said all of this in the same level voice she used when talking about something she had already accepted. We went downstairs together. The phone was on the kitchen counter. She picked it up, and before she answered she looked at me and said, "Please don't say anything." I nodded. She answered. Put it on speaker, I think partly so I could hear what was happening. His voice came through clearly, even and measured the way it always apparently was. He asked if Rosie was asleep. Serena said yes, their daughter was asleep. He said good. Then, without any particular change of tone, he said he had been thinking about the living situation and that his attorney had raised a few questions about the current arrangement that were worth discussing. Serena said it was past midnight. He said that was fine, he would keep it brief. He talked about appearances, about how things looked to outside parties, a single mother, an unrelated man, a young child who had clearly formed an attachment. He said words like ambiguity and unclear boundaries and potential impact on stability. He said it all quite calmly, which was somehow worse than if he had been angry. Serena stood at the counter holding the phone with both hands, her jaw set. She said she was not going to have this conversation tonight. He said she might want to make time for it, because his attorney was already noting things. And then he said the line that was not really about any of it. He said maybe Rosie would be better off with a parent whose life was a little more straightforward. Something moved through Serena's face that I will not try to describe precisely. It was not devastation. It was more like a very old wound being pressed. The kind of thing you know is coming and you still cannot fully brace for it. I stepped forward. Serena looked at me sharply. I stopped, but Daniel had heard me move. His voice shifted slightly, just a fraction sharper. He asked if someone was there. Serena did not answer. He said good night, and then the call ended. She put the phone down on the counter, stood there with her hands flat on the surface. I waited. After a long moment she said she needed to think, and went upstairs and closed her bedroom door. I stayed in the kitchen. After a while I heard a drawer open upstairs. Then another. Then, faintly, the long, slow sound of a zipper. I knew what that sound meant. I did not go upstairs. That felt important. Not to follow her up, not to knock on her door, not to make the decision for her before she had made it herself. Francis had not said that yet, but I think I already understood it in some partial way even then. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Then I moved to the couch. Then I gave up on being comfortable and just went and stood by the kitchen window with a glass of water, looking at the back porch in the dark. At some point, the clock said 2:17. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Serena came into the kitchen in the same gray hoodie, her eyes a little red and her expression the specific kind of tired that is not about sleep. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me, then came in and sat at the table. Neither of us spoke for a minute. Then I noticed it. The navy travel bag sitting beside the front door, upright and handles up, in a way that meant it had been placed there on purpose. Not just set down. Positioned. I said, "Going somewhere?" She said she always found it difficult when people pretended not to see what was directly in front of them. Fair enough. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. She said she had been thinking. She said Daniel was not going to stop. He was going to keep filing things and making calls and finding angles, and the longer I was part of the picture, the more I would become a target in that process. She did not want that for me. She said it quietly and without any self-pity, like she was just laying out facts. I asked her if that was her decision to make for me. She looked at me. I said, and I tried to say it without making it into a speech because it was not a speech, it was just the truth. I said that when she had moved in, maybe I had been doing her a favor. And maybe for the first month or two, that was actually what it was. But somewhere in the middle of all the ordinary days, somewhere between fixing the dripping tap in her bathroom and sitting in a school hall watching Rosie sing a song about frogs at the top of her lungs, I had stopped keeping any kind of score. It had stopped being something I did for them and started being something I needed for myself. This is my life, I said. Not a situation I am managing. My actual life. And I would appreciate being allowed to decide what risks I take in it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she was scared of making a mess of something I had not asked to be in the middle of. I said that was fair. But I was already in the middle of it, and I had been for a while, and I was not looking for a way out. She looked down at her hands. I got up, walked to the front door, and moved the travel bag out of the center of the hallway. Not outside. Not anywhere dramatic. Just to the side, against the wall, so it was no longer standing there like a statement. She was watching me when I turned around. I said I was not trying to make a decision for her. I was just making sure the path was clear whatever she decided. She opened her mouth, then closed it, and then the side door opened and Frances walked in. She was wearing a thick cardigan over her pajamas and carrying a paper bag, and she looked entirely unsurprised to find two adults sitting in a kitchen at 2:30 in the morning looking like people who had been arguing with themselves. She said, "Good. Nobody is asleep. Sit down." She made tea. She sat down across from us. And she listened, actually listened, not the kind of listening where a person is waiting for their turn to offer an opinion. She let Serena talk through all of it, Daniel, the call, the bag, the mediation request that had come through 3 days ago that Serena had not mentioned to me yet. That last part one did not react to, because it was not the moment. When Serena finished, Frances was quiet for a bit. Then she looked at me and said, "Do not go in there tomorrow trying to fix it." I said, "Fix what?" She said, "The mediation meeting. The one you are going to find out about in about 10 minutes when Serena tells you the rest." Serena pressed her fingers to her forehead. Frances said, "You are going to want to go in there and manage things. That is what you do. You walk into a broken place and you figure out how to repair it. But Serena is not a house, Owen. You cannot restore her. She is doing that herself." I said I understood that. Frances said she hoped so. Then she looked at Serena and said something that was simple but that cut through everything else that had been said that night. She said, "The difference between someone rescuing you and someone standing beside you is that one of them needs you to be helpless. Make sure you know which one you are asking for." Serena looked at the table. Frances finished her tea, put the cup in the sink, picked up her paper bag, which, it turned out, had simply contained the thermos she used to carry tea, and let herself out the side door. After she left, Serena and I sat at the kitchen table for another half hour. We did not say very much, but it was different from the silence earlier in the night. Less like two people not talking and more like two people who had said enough and were letting it settle. Eventually she said good night. She went upstairs. She did not take the bag. I was already up when Rosie came down the next morning. I had maybe slept 2 hours. Not because I was in distress exactly. More because my brain had decided that 4 a.m. was a reasonable time to go over everything in detail and would not be talked out of it. I showered, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window and watched the light come up over the field behind the house. Rosie appeared in the kitchen doorway at 7:15 in her mismatched socks, bare under one arm, hair in a state. She looked at me standing at the counter and said, "Oh good, you made coffee," then corrected herself and said, "I mean you're awake." I asked if she wanted toast. She said yes and climbed onto the chair at the kitchen table and told me, in considerable detail, about the recurring dream. A door she could not open no matter how she tried it. I turned the toast when it needed turning and listened and did not say anything particularly useful. At the end she said she thought the door probably opened from the other side, and you just had to wait for the right person to open it for you. Then she ate her toast. Serena came down about 45 minutes later. She looked like she had slept a little better than me, which was good. She poured tea and we moved around each other in the kitchen without making it awkward, which was something we had gotten good at over 16 months of practice. When Rosie went upstairs to find her school bag, Serena put her mug down and told me about the mediation meeting. She said Daniel had filed a formal request for a custody review 2 weeks ago. There was a scheduled meeting with a mediator the following morning. She had a legal aid appointment that afternoon to prepare. She said she was sorry she had not told me sooner. She said she had been trying to keep it contained. I said I understood. I asked if she needed anything from me today. She thought about it. Then she said just be here tonight. When I get back from the appointment, I do not want to come home to an empty kitchen. I said I would be here. She nodded, called upstairs for Rosie to hurry up. The day was long. I had a job across town, a full renovation quote for a family who had bought a Victorian terrace in bad condition. I spent 4 hours walking through their property making notes, and then another 2 hours at my desk writing up the assessment. My brain was only partially in it. The other part was somewhere in a mediation office I had never seen, thinking about a conversation that had not happened yet. That evening I was back before Serena got home. I had started dinner. Nothing complicated. A pot of soup with bread, and was sitting at the kitchen table with my notes when I heard her car in the driveway. She came in looking tired. Not defeated. Just the specific tiredness of a day that has required a lot of careful handling. She put her bag on the counter and stood there for a second, and then she said, "There's a decent chance Daniel tries to bring you up in the meeting tomorrow. His attorney has apparently been making notes about the living arrangement." I said, "All right." She looked at me. "Just all right?" I said, "Do you want me to do something about it?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she sat down at the table and said, "I don't know what I want you to do. I know I don't want you to feel like you have to do anything." I pushed a bowl of soup in front of her. We ate. Rosie came downstairs and informed us that she had decided to write a book about penguins and needed help with the first chapter after dinner. We helped her with the first chapter. It was mostly a list of facts she had learned at school, presented in no particular order with illustrations. It was excellent. After Rosie went to bed, Serena and I sat at the kitchen table again with tea going cold. She asked me, plainly and without preamble, whether I was planning to come to the mediation meeting. I said I had been thinking about it. She said she was not asking me to. She also said she was not asking me not to. I said I knew. I said I needed to work out whether showing up would help her or just make me feel better about myself. She looked at me for a second. Then she said, "That might be the most honest thing you have said in 2 years." I said, "Give me some credit, I have had other honest moments." She almost smiled. It was the first thing close to a smile I had seen from her all day. I went to the mediation office the next morning. I got there 15 minutes early. Serena was already there with Rosie, sitting in 2 chairs along the waiting room wall. Rosie swinging her legs, Serena holding her hand and looking at the middle distance. Daniel was standing near the window in a dark suit, the kind of suit that is meant to communicate something. He saw me come in. His expression did not change exactly, but something behind it did. Serena looked up. Something in her face shifted. It was not relief, quite. More like something she had been bracing against was no longer there. She said I did not have to come. I sat down in the empty chair on her other side. I said, "I know." Rosie, without looking up, reached over and held my hand. Daniel walked over and extended his hand to me. I looked at it. Then I looked at him. I did not take it. He let his hand drop and his mouth did something that was not a smile. When the mediator opened the conference room door, we all went in. The first 40 minutes were procedural. Parenting schedules, school terms, holiday arrangements. Serena answered every question clearly and without hesitation. Daniel answered with the polished reasonableness of someone who had rehearsed being reasonable. The mediator made notes. I sat and said nothing. Near the end, Daniel leaned back in his chair, just slightly, just enough to signal that he was changing mode, and told the mediator he had some concerns about the home environment. He was calm about it. He mentioned a child forming an emotional attachment to an unrelated adult. He mentioned the potential for confusion. He used phrases like structural ambiguity and inconsistency of parental figures. The mediator asked if I wanted to respond. I looked at Serena. She was looking at the table. I said I was not there to replace anyone, and I was not interested in any title. I said I was there because Rosie was 8 years old and had started sleeping better since they moved in, and because Serena had rebuilt her life from the ground up in the past 2 years and had done it without anyone's help. I said both of them made the farmhouse feel like somewhere a person would want to come home to, and I did not think that was something to raise concerns about. I said, what you are describing as instability is just a family. It does not look like the version you wanted. That is a different problem. Daniel said nothing. The mediator wrote something down. Under the table, Serena pressed her fingers against the back of my hand. The meeting ended. No verdict, no resolution on the spot. That was not how mediation worked. But there was a shift in the room at some point during that last exchange that everyone present could feel, even if no one named it. Daniel had come in expecting to control the frame of the conversation. He did not get to do that. He left without speaking to me again. At the door he paused and said something to Serena in a low voice. I could not hear it. She listened and then said something back, also quiet, and whatever it was made him press his mouth together and walk out. She told me later, in the truck on the way home, that she had told him she was done explaining herself to him. That Rosie was well and safe and loved, and she would see him at the next scheduled visit. Nothing more. I said, good. She said, it felt good. Felt very good, actually. In the back seat, Rosie had fallen asleep against the window within 10 minutes of us leaving, still holding her bear. She slept the whole way home. When we pulled into the driveway, Serena sat in the passenger seat for a moment after I turned off the engine, looking at the farmhouse. The porch light was on. I had left it on that morning, not thinking about it. She looked at it and then she said, I have been afraid of this house. I frowned and said, this house? She said, not the building. She said she had been afraid of how much she had started to like it, how much it had started to feel like somewhere she actually wanted to be, rather than somewhere she was staying while she figured things out. She said that scared her because she had been wrong before about the places she thought were safe. I said, I know. She looked at me. I said, I am not asking you to stop being afraid. I am just asking you to stay anyway. She was quiet for a bit. Then she said, okay. Just that. Okay. We carried Rosie inside between us, still mostly asleep, and got her upstairs and into bed without fully waking her. The bear went under her chin. Serena tucked the blanket in at the edges the way she always did. We came back downstairs to a kitchen that still had the soup pot from dinner 2 nights ago sitting clean on the stove, and the legal papers Serena had been reviewing spread across the end of the table. She gathered them up without saying anything and put them in a folder. I made tea. She sat at the table and said, so what happens now? I sat across from her and said, I think we stop running the agreement like it is still what we both want. She said, it kept things simple. I said, it kept things lonely. She looked at her mug. Then she said, I do not know how to do this without being careful. I said, I am not asking you to stop being careful. Being careful and being open are not the same thing. She looked up at me. I said, you have been so busy protecting Rosie from being hurt that you forgot she is also watching how you live. She is going to learn from that. What you let yourself want. What you decide you deserve. Serena did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, that is a somewhat confronting thing to say to a person. I said, I know. I have been sitting on it for about 4 months. She laughed. An actual one, not a polite one. And it was like something in the room loosened. Some tight thing that had been wound up across the whole long night finally let go. We sat there and drank tea and talked until past midnight, which was the first time we had done that without it being about a crisis. We talked about small things. Rosie's penguin book. A job I had coming up in the spring that would take 3 months. Whether the back porch could realistically be leveled before winter. Serena said she had always liked the tilt. I said she only said that because she had never tried to put a glass of water on the railing without it sliding off. After a while she stood up, put her mug in the sink and said good night. At the bottom of the stairs she stopped and turned back and looked at me. She did not say anything. She just looked, for a second, like she was deciding something. Then she went upstairs. I sat at the table a little longer. In the morning, the travel bag was still in the hallway where I had moved it. Serena came downstairs before Rosie, which was unusual, and without saying anything, picked the bag up and carried it upstairs. I heard her bedroom door open, heard drawers, the sounds of things being put away. I poured her tea when I heard her coming back down. 3 months went by. They were not neat months. Daniel filed 2 more procedural motions. There was a week in January when Serena had a legal call every other day and came home from each one looking like she had just finished something exhausting. On a Tuesday night, I found her at the kitchen table with a folder open and a pen in her hand and the look of someone doing arithmetic that does not come out right. I sat down with her. I did not try to take the folder. I just stayed, and after a while she closed it and said thank you without looking at me, and I said nothing because nothing needed saying. Rosie stopped calling me Mr. Owen somewhere around week 6 and just called me Owen, which she explained was because they were properly friends now. The distinction was apparently significant. I finished the back porch on a Sunday in early autumn. New supports, new boards, 2 weekends of adjustment. I set my level on the surface and the bubble sat exactly centered and did not move. I went inside and asked Serena if she wanted to see. She came out in her jacket with her hands in her pockets. The field behind the house had gone gold. She stood on the porch and looked out at it for a moment and then down at the boards under her feet. She said, "It does not tilt anymore." I said, "No." She said, "I think I am going to miss it a little." I said, "You said you liked the tilt." She said, "I said I did not mind it. There is a difference." I reached into my jacket pocket. She turned when she heard the movement, looked down. Her hand came up and covered her mouth. I told her I was not good at speeches and she already knew that, so I was not going to attempt one. I said I had been carrying the ring for 6 weeks trying to identify the correct moment, and I had finally accepted that there was not a correct moment. There was just this one. A Sunday afternoon on a finally level porch. I got down on one knee. From the kitchen doorway behind us, Rosie's voice came through clearly and without any attempt at subtlety, saying that she had been watching for 5 minutes and it was about time. Serena turned, eyes full, and told her to go back inside. Rosie said she absolutely would not. Serena looked back at me. She was somewhere between crying and laughing and had not quite landed on either. She said yes before I had fully finished asking. Just yes, cleanly and without qualification, the way she said things when she meant them completely. I put the ring on her finger. Rosie came out the door at speed and hit both of us at once. I caught them. All 3 of us stood on the level porch while the autumn light went long across the field, and the old farmhouse held steady behind us. That is the whole story. A house that needed fixing and 2 people who figured out slowly and imperfectly that they did too. Some things take time. Some things take 3 quiet knocks at midnight. And some things were already true long before either person was ready to say so.